So tell us a bit about your talk at CREST 2012. You're talking about the need for businesses to have a rapid response to security incidents. Why is that important?
Well, it's important for two things. For one, it is often easier to stop an attack or intrusion if you respond to it quickly. So if you identify how people came into your company, you can maybe kick them out. The second part is whenever such intrusions happen and become known to management, they want a quick reaction now, even if to quell their own panic and shock. So one of the points I wanted to emphasize in my talk is that it's not just about technology that you have to deal with and what you have to do in computers network. You also have to manage the organization from the incident. So whenever crisis hits, you have to manage that crisis. And this is also, by moving in quickly, you can put all these efforts into a constructive way.
So are there any arguments against responding quickly? Are there any downsides to it?
A lot of people are hesitant to admit that they have a problem, even if it becomes very obvious. Common arguments are, well, the email is still going on. Why do we have to deal with that at all? Can we just brush it under the rug? However, as with recent high-profile breaches, some of the impacts are great. A recent case with Nortel that became known turns out that they were breached for 10 years and senior management knew that but did nothing. And it might have contributed to their eventual bankruptcy.
So is a rapid response as much about containing the reputational damage as it is about containing the physical and informational damage that the attack itself might cause?
Often when you've learned about this response, you already lost a portion of data because this is how you learned about the response. So in that sense, your two main objectives is to A, contain this, so contain the damage. Two, as you mentioned, it's about managing the outwards communication. But third, once the organization knows about it, there is a great distrust from the business side of the organization onto the networks and systems. And you go, how can I trust? And so by moving in quickly, you can sort of stop this wave of panic and move to rebuilding trust much faster. And therefore, business continues to be more productive, although they've had a certain setback.
You also said in your presentation that there is best practice that companies can follow, and then also ways of ensuring that they learn the lessons from any breach. What would you say the most important elements of best practice are?
The most important elements of best practice would be around, for one, recognizing that this might happen to anyone, and also you are following something which, historic industrial best practice, such as you apply patches and you have risk management, this still can happen, and you have to have a contingency plan to deal with that. And although you might be under-resourced to have a full incident response team, there are certain things you can do relatively cheaply that will help you to contain this incident, and it's just a good management decision to do at least the base minimum and admit to yourself that this could happen to me as well and act from there on.
And is it your experience as an advisor that companies become better at dealing with these things if they have had an incident and they've responded and learned from that, or do they go back to the start every time and learn every lesson again from scratch?
I find that once they've had the shock, their mindset changes often completely, much like somebody whose house has been broken into will put strong locks and bars on the windows and doors. So companies will start doing the same. However, this message needs to be reinforced consistently. Otherwise, after 1 or 2 years, the management changes, people change, and people forget. And there may lie a risk that you still fall back to the old insecure practices because simply the tribal lore is gone by then.
And finally, do you see any difference in practices in countries where, for example, there are quite strict rules around disclosure of breaches, as there are, for example, in the state of California in the US, and in other parts of the world where there aren't such legal requirements on disclosure and therefore perhaps less of a direct incentive to respond rapidly?
For all the disclosure laws that have been put in place, they have been largely ineffective, unfortunately. For example, in the US, you disclose it and you say, well, for every customer, like an example, financial data breach, I'm going to pay $5 for credit card monitoring for the next 2 years. So those disclosure laws just say there's going to be a fixed cost for your incident. And real security change is never driven by such disclosure laws. It's more driven by the fear that whatever damage you have will permanently cripple your business. As long as that fear is not there, nothing gets done.
Konrad Smelkovs from KPMG, thank you.